He will even oppose the prince of princes. Now that's a mistake. And he will be broken without human agency. I like the King James, without hand. Which links us back to chapter 2, that a stone was cut out of the mountains without hand. The stone that hit the statue without hand. It's God that is doing the destroying. He will be broken, crushed without hand. The vision of the evenings and mornings which has been told is true, but keep the vision secret, Gabriel says, for it pertains to many days in the future. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up and carried on the king's business. But as I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. I guess no one except Gabriel. but here, nobody else. I don't think any other Israelites, maybe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, just don't have any idea what this vision was all about. Right. His friends maybe couldn't explain it.
None understood it.
But Gabriel interprets the vision for us. But let's go back and try to break it down. Okay, we got two animals. We've got a ram coming from the east. We have a shaggy goat coming from the west. I got a picture there. That's what they look like. I think that's a pretty good picture. The shaggy goat just has one horn, and they butt heads, and then the horn is broken. He's trampled down. The one with the two horns is trampled down. The period of the kingdom of the Medes and Persians comes to an end. Alexander the Great takes over. And I have in your notes here, Alexander the Great, the large horn that's between the eyes of that goat. Alexander the Great, the son of Philip of Macedonia, trained by Aristotle, conquered the whole Middle East in 3 years, in his early to mid-20s, just a young guy. In 334 BC, he defeated the Persians at Granicus. 333 BC, defeated Darius and 600,000 Persian troops at Issus. He married Darius's daughter, seeking to wed east and west. He founded the city of Alexandria, died in 323 at the age of 33, mourning that there were no more worlds to conquer. And so the history of Alexander the Great. Yes?
Who are the Medes today?
I'm sorry, what?
Who are the descendants of the Medes? Who are the descendants of Persians? Who are the Medes?
As far as I know, there are none.
They're what?
There are none. They completely out.
There are people
Assyria.
in northern Iraq that, I mean, like individual families that still know that their ancestors were Medes or Assyrians or Persians, or so as far as a nationality, I don't think there is one, but there are small groups of cultural groups that recognize their ethnicity as being from Medes.
Okay, let's continue. So the big horn of that shaggy goat was broken after he became mighty. But as soon as then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn, this is talking of Alexander the Great, was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Now, remember the leopard in chapter 7. What did we know? It had 4 heads and 4 wings. And so again, we have a description of these empires. By this time, the Babylonian Empire is not the focus. But we're talking in the future now about the Medes and the Persians, and then Greece. We learned this morning that when Alexander the Great, when he mourned that there was no more worlds to conquer, he was dying, some kind of a dreadful disease. They asked him, who will get the kingdom? And he said, the 4 strongest among you. And we talked about the fourfold breakup of Alexander's empire this morning. So, the empire was broken into 4 parts. Verse 9, towards the 4 winds of heaven. You've got a map here. If you want to look at your map. The 4 parts, and I've also got the map back here. One of them became Macedonia, one of them Thrace, one Syria, and one Egypt. And I've got some arrows on here, and I'm just trying to trace the story here. Let's go back to verse 8. The male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came forth 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. So we've got an east, a west, a north, and the south quadrant here of Alexander's empire. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south. So if it's becoming exceedingly great toward the south, it must be coming from the north, correct? Toward the east. So if it's going toward the east, it's kind of coming from the northwest somewhat. And toward the beautiful land. The most beautiful land, the land of Israel. Well, I didn't really know where to originate which of the 4 quadrants. We know out of one of them, the little horn breaks forth. You know what I chose? I chose this place in the eastern part of Turkey, and the only reason I chose that place, in Revelation, it talks about where Satan, in Pergamum, where Satan's seat is. So I thought, well, that'll be a good place to put as a starting point. We really don't know exactly where he will originate, but it looks like it's going to come from this general area. If he's going south towards Egypt, east towards Syria, and toward the beautiful land, I kind of think it's going to be somewhere in this general area. Any comments on that?
So, Phil, you've got the map there. It's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different. I've actually changed my view a little bit since I drew that map. So my view, we learned when we studied chapter 2 that the 2 feet of the statue, one was in Europe area and one was in the Middle East. And so we're kind of looking at the area that would have been the foot that would have been standing in the Middle Eastern part. And this is just guesswork. We still kind of know in part and prophesy in part. But if we consider other scriptures about the origin of Antichrist, because we're talking about here really where the little horn, the same one that we read about this morning in chapter 7, where this guy's going to come from. It's like the Spirit is directing us to look at the maps, to consider the geographies.
I think a real key is verse 9, out of one of them. In other words, that reduces your options to 4. And if you consider, am I right?
Yes.
Would you agree? If you consider the south would be Egypt.
Yes.
You could rule out the south. So he has to come somewhere from the north of Israel. And instead of coming from a westerly, he's going to wax in a southeasterly direction. He's going to go east and possess things to the east and to his south. And on the way south, the pleasant land is on the way also.
Yes.
Now, if I disagree with some scholars who try to put all these things about Antiochus Epiphanes back in antiquity. We've been making a case that these things are future. We haven't come to this yet, but in Daniel chapter 11, But there's a whole chronology of events there that begin with someone that's called the vile person, and there's a real case that can be made. I think you'll appreciate when we look at it, that the vile person is in fact the little horn. This is the same little horn, by the way, that was in Daniel 7, but with this difference. Here, you go directly from the Grecian kingdom all the way to the very end.
Yes.
You've skipped the fourth kingdom. And the fourth kingdom is in view there, and then there's references in Daniel 9 about the sanctuary, and we know that the city and the sanctuary, and there was a destruction in 70 AD under Rome. So Daniel 9 does not necessarily skip the fourth kingdom. But here you jump from Greece all the way to the end, and you do that also in Revelation 11, which is significant.
Yes.
Now, there was wars. Israel was in the crossfire between. There was two main kings. I mean, there was the king that had the eastern part of Elam, in that area. I think Lysimachus or whatever, and there was Cassander that had Macedonia. But the real occupation of history was between the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdom. There was a whole line there's a bunch of Antichuses. That's why you have the third and the fourth. And down in Egypt, you had a bunch of Ptolemies. You had Ptolemy this and then Ptolemy Longimanus and no, it wasn't. I'm sorry, but just a lot of these guys were named. But that was the war. It was between. So if we do recognize a type, not an exhaustive fulfillment, mind you, but a definite type that gives us a paradigm, sort of a taste or an object lesson from history, then the real engagement that distressed Israel was between Syria and Egypt.
Yes.
So the actual forebear of the guy that would actually be the prototype of the coming Antichrist, which was Antiochus IV, he was from the kingdom of Syria. Now, the puzzle thickens from there. In Daniel 11, we're going to get there. It doesn't say he starts necessarily there. He comes into what's called the greatness of the kingdom. And the greatness of the kingdom would situate him either in Syria or like you're suggesting further north. I like something smaller at first. But he doesn't stay small. He comes up and becomes strong. But the scripture in Daniel 11 suggests, if we take it literally and we apply it to a future fulfillment, that there's been a momentary power vacuum in those ancient times in Syria, but in this case to the north of Israel, somewhere to the north of Israel. And during that power vacuum, this one that's acquired popular support regionally, he takes that opportunity to come in, and the kingdom is not normally going to be given to him. He comes in and takes the kingdom with flatteries. And it says that he does not stand in natural succession. They do not give him the honor of the kingdom, but he's a tricky guy. This guy is called a despicable or a vile person. And he's the one that wages the final war against Israel, and he's the one that takes away the sacrifice. The point that I'm making here is I favor something more like Syria because that's what antiquity conforms to. Does that lock it in on Syria? No.
But Syria at this time was Turkey. At the time,
it embraced a lot of Turkey.
Yeah, right. A lot of Turkey. So Syria at the time of Daniel was not like Syria we have today. It was much more expanded.
But Damascus was the capital at
Okay.
that time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
So could it be
just a suggestion. I'm not trying to be dogmatic with it, but just, here's the reason I say that is because everyone's looking to Western Europe, the 10 nations of the common market country. There's a strong case that we can also see in Daniel 11 that the 10 nations are Islamic powers that hate Israel by reason of the issue of the land and the covenant. So I'm suggesting that the 10 nations could be Arab. I believe they are Arab nations. And they're in the east and not the west. Go ahead.
So with that little horn could be one country and its allies.
Exactly.
Yes.
He brings down these great powers. He's not himself a great power, at least not at first.
And we also, from the scriptures, if we look in Ezekiel 38, this also helps us to pinpoint a little bit the prophecy concerning Gog. And Gog, most scholars agree, is Antichrist. Magog is the geographical area that Gog comes from.
Well, you can nail it.
Yes.
I would just refer you to Ezekiel chapter 38:17.
Yes, I'm right there.
Powerful scripture that says this is the one that all the prophets of Israel spoke
Yes, that's
about.
what I was.